can grab our Hangout content, the people who are joining up, and I urge you all to consider cutting out moments that you think are valuable and posting them to Steemit in return for upvotes and in return for promoting the people who are doing things in the space. BitShares and Beyond Bitcoin and Steem and EOS and all these and Peer Plays and all these other chains, they're going to really offer a lot of value between each other. So we're building a community that's trying to understand all that. I missed you too, Enrico. I'm glad you're back around, buddy. I'm so frigging busy, but we got some good stuff coming. So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit late today. That's okay. During these interviews that you have most places, they have them all figured out behind the scenes. Sometimes live is not as pretty as the polished, cut up versions of everything that everybody likes to put out. We're doing something a little bit more grassroots, and we're trying to enable everybody else to bring value and earn from this ecosystem by kind of polishing things up themselves if they want to, promote things about themselves or others. Smoke Network was one of them that did it last week. As you guys can see, they actually cut up their own part and posted it, and they're going to probably begin doing that quite frequently. So with that said, follow the lead of people who are doing these things. They show you the way. We just have a template for you to follow. And with that said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start recording right now. Welcome everyone to a BitShares Open Agenda Hangout on the Beyond Coin Network. Today is Friday, August 25th, 2017, and I am Official Fuzzy hosting this particular Hangout. We hold this Hangout every Friday, but we might be changing that here very shortly, and I'll talk to you guys about that later on today to cap off this episode. However, everything else will remain the same. We have an RSVP thread on steemit.com at the Official Fuzzy account blog. You can join every week, look for the RSVP post, and we love to find people who are working on projects that might want to share drop on BitShares, who are trying to get workers put together or BitShares improvement proposals, aka BSIPs, put together to try to help enable a decentralized community to govern itself and help to pay for its own evolution. Of course, that cannot just happen with one or two people or even, 30 people or 40 people who are in a hangout at any given time. It requires an entire community to work together. However, these hangouts are a very good place to enable the connections between one another in the BitShares ecosystem and to further enable people to build and get paid for what they're doing. Now, with that said, we have today 4 different topics that we're going to cover after we get through the weekly BitShares State of the Network report. And I will go over those as soon as I finish the little portion that Steam Power on steemit.com posts to kind of give us an excerpt every week of his full report, which you can find on his profile on Steemit. So this is today's extract from this week's BitShares State of the Network report. At Stan on Steemit, Larimer, and Dan Howard have done a great interview. Chris and Dan have done a great interview with Chris and Danny from the Crypto Show. The BitShares UI proposal, which involves paying contributors for remediation of approved issues, has been a huge success, with 21 issues being closed in the current sprint. At BitSpark on Steemit has released part 2 of their plan to unbank the banked with BitShares. At RichCG, that is RICHCG, has been working on an updated design for the BitShares.org website. At Jeremy Peng, that is JEREMYPENG, has announced that his small development team has been working on BitShares mobile wallet. So that is the update, and you can go to the link that he provides on our thread to read the full BitShares State of the Network report, which is published weekly, and this is a great place to go to find various things that are going on in the ecosystem in a really quick 1-page or 2-page summary every week. After this, we're going to go ahead and go into the various topics for the week. First in line is going to be IntelliGuy to talk a little bit about what his thoughts were on the Crypto Show interview with Stan. Alex P. Morris will come up next, who will be talking a little bit more about the order matching fix and the status of that project and where he is. And then we're going to talk with Talkinator, who's going to talk a little bit about the bug fixes and locking away BTS for voting. And then I'm going to cap off this hangout with just a quick update on what we have seen in the poll that we posted, that we said we would post last week, regarding a change in the times from Fridays to Saturdays. So with that said, I'll go ahead and I'll ask IntelliGuy, are you available to talk? Oh, looks like IntelliGuy is not here. Okay, so IntelliGuy is not here. Is there anybody who would like to talk about what he was bringing up for today? What we do is we have upvote tokens that we pass out to people who are in this space and understanding what is going on, and join up with these hangouts to participate. These are meant to upvote you on Steam and get you noticed by other people who might upvote you, but in the same note, to be able to pay you a little bit for your time. So those who join up with ideas or anything that they would like to cover, or those who cover ideas that somebody brings up on our threads, are the ones who are going to be earning tokens from this hangout. Every week we pass out probably $500 or $600 worth to different people within these hangouts. So feel free to, if anybody has anything that they would like to bring up. I personally have not seen the interview with them on the Crypto Show, but from what I've understood, it's pretty good. Does anybody have any thoughts on this, or should we move forward?
Well, I think it was a very good interview. I think it was very thorough. That's what I liked about it.
Thorough, like how long was it?
Wait a second, I'm just realizing I'm talking about the interview with Dan Larimer last night. Are you talking about the one with Stan?
That's the one that IntelliGuy brought up, but I'm sure, I mean, if you want to talk about the other one, that's fine too.
Actually, the other one, the one that was where Dan Larimer was being interviewed, I thought was even better. The one I saw the one for Stan a day or so ago, and it was good as well. I thought it was not bad, but Dan's was much more professional. It was smoother. The questions were a little bit more pointed, and so I like the one with Dan a little better myself.
And did it cover any topics that would be new to the BitShares community, or do you think it was more interesting for people unfamiliar with BitShares?
Well, I don't know if I would say it. I mean, there was plenty of history covered. So, as far as it being of interest to newbies in BitShares, I think it would be. But it also had a lot of technical depth as well. So, it's a mix. I think it catered to both audiences actually.
Good.
That's kind of the discussion that I try to deal with myself, is how do you have a little bit of both in this space, you know, and how does a little bit of both translate to the demographic we're reaching? Because you don't have many people who are a little bit of both, who are newbies, and you know, you have a lot of people who are very new to cryptocurrency and this high level stuff. Most of them are very new to cryptocurrency, and this high level stuff, almost, even if a lot of it's easy to understand, some of it kind of scares them away from it, from the project.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to crypto that's intimidating to new people. Even new programmers can be intimidated at times, but that's a little harder to do, of course. But in my view, if I was running a show like this, I would probably do different segments, to where in one segment, maybe every 15 minutes, if you have an hour-long show, break it down into 4 segments and then address each element in those different segments. But another train of thought would be that, well, you want to keep everybody interested all the time, so you're going to want to intersperse those technical and non-technical subjects throughout the entire show. So there's different ways to look at it, of course.
I always thought that having a production team, if I had one, we could put together like little things and like did you know about BitShares? And we could just always go ahead and like put those into Hangouts or give them as a package to people who promote our Hangouts, and they can make money on YouTube by posting them and things like that. And maybe even add advertisements to it from their channels and stuff. I see a value in enabling people to kind of like help out, because I feel like that's one of the best ways to get newbies to learn. In addition to, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can learn from listening to people, but if you can dive in, create your own token with very little risk, and try to bring value to it, and join a community that's trying to do this and has been part of that for quite some time. In my mind, it's one of the better ways for us to teach people on a grassroots level without having all that ridiculous amounts of funding that might come from sponsorships with people who or organizations that may or may not really have the best interests of the viewers in mind. We don't know, but one thing we do know is that we can control how we do things. And I've kind of always thought that element in allowing people to kind of participate in that, in an experiential type of learning experience, right, might be a valuable thing. I know I've learned a lot from you guys over the course of this time. And I'm not completely a newbie, right?
Nope.
Okay, so they did have segments, is what Solar Sherpa was saying. Stan was on the first section, and Lynn Albright came on the second hour. Yeah, I noticed that Lynn came on. What did she talk about? That's something that we don't really talk about, but for people who don't know who Lynn Albright is, or Albrecht, I think some people say that is how you say it. I've always called it Albright, but her son was the one who ran Silk Road in the
Allegedly.
very earliest. Yeah, allegedly. Thank you for saying that. He
got it started. He built it, and then how it was run after the fact, we don't really know for sure. But, I get the impression. I get the impression from what I've heard of Lynn speak of it that he wasn't the leader of it per se. He had a strong hand in it because he invented it, but I think he turned over a lot of administrative duties to other people.
Because you would have to, as it grew. And what's happened to him has kind of been a really, one of the scare stories in crypto.
Yes.
But at the same time, I can argue that the story with the Silk Road was one of the things that really brought Bitcoin to the mainstream too. Maybe you guys would agree or disagree, but that's a very interesting story too. So I'd be interested to see, did Stan and her talk at all?
Just very briefly, there was a little bit of overlap at the end. Stan, you can chime in if you have anything to add to that.
No, that they just carried us over a few minutes into her hour and introduced her, and then finished up with us. There was really no back and forth.
Gotcha. Well, Stan, do you have anything that you'd like to talk about with respect to the show, since you're here talking?
No, I enjoyed it. I thought they did a good job. It was a little bit disconcerting to hear them throw in a Dash commercial timed with every topic we talked about, but that Dash is one of their sponsors, so I guess that comes with the territory. But other than that, I thought they were very fair, didn't interrupt, let us talk, in long monologues. And so I thought we covered a lot, although, looking back at it, we always seem to spend too much time answering rudimentary questions and never really getting to the important stuff until we're running out of time. So I got to learn to steer the conversations quickly to the new stuff as much as possible.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I remember whenever I was talking to SGT, he said, all we need is 20 minutes. And I laughed. I said, yeah, honestly, I think we could talk about this for 3 or 4 hours, even if I had everything lined up.
Yeah, I thought you did a pretty darn good job myself, Stan, on that interview. I like the one that was done on Epicenter with your son better, just because the content seemed to be a little more technical and more depth to it. But I think you covered the topics of what we're going through in BitShares and the marketing efforts you're doing quite well.
Yeah, I really liked the job Dan did on his talk. it covered a lot of detail, and gives me lots of ammunition that maybe I can work into future interviews.
Were the questions that you were asked, were they more like basic people, like people who are kind of new to the scene, just learning about crypto? Is that kind of how you see it?
Well, it was. I think they got to the point, but it was just like there's so much in BitShares, and first off, it's like, what is BitShares, and how is it different from Bitcoin, and then what are some of the features, and what's a market pegged asset, and what other kind of tokens do you have, and what other features do you have, and by the time you've worked your way up through all of that to get to talking about the hero and the billion hero campaign and our vision for taking it mainstream. You know, you've had to work a lot to build your way up through that. Now, in other interviews, I've been asked to go in and explain how is DPoS different, and I've learned to sort of duck that question as being, yeah, it's obligatory, but it's also not interested to 99% of the people out there who couldn't tell the difference between DPoS and POW or anything like that. And I really like to decline or dodge as quick as possible getting drugged down into the weeds. And I think I need to learn to do that a little bit more, even on good, honest, beginning BitShares questions, if we're ever going to get to the important stuff to get people excited.
One thing I did notice with Dan's interview was that the Epicenter guys seem to be more favorable. I mean, they were very congratulatory, or they were very they basically gave Dan a lot of high marks, and they had that attitude from the very beginning. So it wasn't adversarial like you encounter on many of the other shows, and it wasn't coming from a totally I don't understand DPoS at all kind of perspective. They had some background, they had some things in there, so I thought it was pretty good from that standpoint.
Well, that sounds even like it might be a little bit of a change from some of the past stuff that we heard. Like it almost seemed like for a long time all this stuff was even ignored, but when it was brought up, it was brought up with kind of a derisive kind of chuckle, or like this is not really a real blockchain. I've even heard things like it's not a real blockchain, and I don't even know what to say. But it's funny to see that how everybody's starting to realize what a lot of the people, a lot of you who've been here for quite some time, have realized for what, dang near a little bit over 4 years now. Actually closer to 5 if you count in PTS and AGS, right? It's a long time coming, is I guess my point.
The other thing I will say about that interview is I think it's a really good interview, reflected well on BitShares itself, gave lots of good coverage, and I actually told our guys, find a way to use that interview when we're talking about BitShares, because just the things he talks about and the new good publicity they're getting on EOS reflects on the whole product line. And I think that we're going to get this, drafting effect, if you will, going along behind their semi. That'll help accelerate BitShares as well.
Yeah, I hope that we figure out what we're going to be doing as far as how we're going to use that draft effect. That's one of the things that we brought up a while back, but maybe I should start posting that topic a little bit more too, to talk about it. But how we're going to, we've talked about having multiple potential ways of utilizing EOS. Like, are we going to move to EOS? Are we going to is BitShares going to become like a clone of EOS? Is it going to sidechain with EOS? Like, these are the types of things that we've talked about a little bit. But maybe this is something that we should really be considering a lot more too, because let's face it, if we're like the DEX for all of EOS, we're in a very good place.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's necessary for us to know the exact details. There's at least 4 different ways that an upgrade might occur. I think it's important for us to say with confidence that we're going to pick the best of those 4 when we get a little closer to it and move in that direction. I like to kid around and say that EOS is, basically our R&D department for BitShares. And, that's where all the new technology is coming from. And, we will capitalize on it and be ready to use it when the time comes, but, give our smart people a chance to sort of watch it and see where we're going. And then the community will pick a way forward that makes the most sense. And we want to be there, with something working, the day it goes live. It sounded like it was going to be somewhere around May when it would be through with its stress testing phase. So no later than next May, I would say we want to, be the first blockchain on there. And in the meantime, we got plenty of bandwidth to handle the load we can pile on it this year. And so I'm concentrating on getting as much business onto BitShares as possible so that when we upgrade, we land on EOS with the biggest network effect, and no other decks need apply.
Well, I won't disagree with you on any of that, and it's kind of interesting. I'll even add on to this to notice that Brendan Bloomer is talking about DAX now. We're seeing the reemergence of that term come out. It's kind of cool to see that these things that many of us kind of like, we didn't hear the industry talk about DAX for years, right? And BitShares is where this entire thing started, where we started talking about DAX. And you even have, your decentralized autonomous Android picture on the runway that kind of shows those DAX, right? It's cool to see that we're coming to the point where this stuff is starting to reach a little bit more of a level of appreciation in the space. And I want to say thank you to all of you guys, because without all of the work that everyone who's been part of this and part of the BitShares community, and heck, the ProtoShares and AngelShares communities, if you guys remember that, not many do these days, but there still are some. All of those people along the way have helped us get here. And it's really cool. I'll just say that it's really, it's really cool. And watching, when we went to FinTech Week, my wife and I went the other day, there's ARC, which is another delegated proof of stake, that was there. The industry starting to look at the delegated proof of stake as a solid option. And I think we're seeing those days where I said, I think we've made it when we have a bunch of chains that are delegated proof of stake that are taking up the top 50 spots on CoinMarketCap, right? And I think we're starting to get to that point. We're going to start seeing it, Stan.
Yeah, and I think the money quote last night, with somebody asked him, how do you compare EOS to Ethereum? And he says, well, Ethereum can't implement either BitShares or Steem it. Yeah, I think that was just super powerful.
Yeah, Dan has had a couple of statements that I almost felt ashamed chuckling, but at the same time they were true. And it's kind of like saying, he's giving the truth at a time when now people will listen, But with that said, does anybody else have any thoughts on this subject?
This is Solar Sherpa. I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Perfectly, actually.
Pardon?
Hear you perfectly.
Thanks. I listened to both interviews. I always listen to podcasts on my drive to work. The crypto show, which I listen to a lot, I think we could benefit from trying to get back on there as a guest again. Like they've have Lynn Albrecht on there, it seems once a month or so. And so you can pick up the pace of the interview a lot more. Like if Stan's able to get back on there talking about the Hero Challenge, you wouldn't have to go back, hopefully, and revisit all the initial stuff to get started on it. And then the interview with Dan was phenomenal. As a relative newbie, I learned so much about EOS that I was completely unaware of. So both great interviews.
Yeah, I feel like we're about to hit hyperdrive and just, go into light speed. And I don't know like what to do other than smile and keep as busy as possible. I know that our community is growing, which it's, BitShares itself has what, 2,200 people in Telegram. We have WhaleShares that has over 1,800 people, and that's between Steam and BitShares. So we've got that, and in addition, we have EOS Telegram, which has like 5.2K. That's a lot of people who are very technologically savvy and interested in cryptocurrency. And our community is not that big. You know what I mean? So the fact that there are 5K in there, about what, a total of 9K between just those three channels, that's a pretty hardcore thing that I don't think a lot of people realize. But they're starting to. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Or would you guys like to move on to the next topics?
Just a quick input. I think if anyone's
Sure.
serious about BTS going on to EOS, they should make a BSIP just so that, people can go read over the proposals. Assuming people are just up for it is not appropriate. I mean, people will not vote for it if you're not going to give them the information ahead of time. You know what I mean?
You're right.
Good point.
Cool. Next topic.
Well, that's a good topic that I'd like to be brought up next Hangout, actually, if we could, like actually RSVP for it, because these are the types of initiatives that I can support with the funding I have, and we can help out as much as possible, right? I see this as one of the things that we were trying to get done in the very early days. EOS is going to enable a lot of this, so we should really use it as a tool as opposed to looking at it as a competitor. All of these chains, like as you guys can see between WhaleShares, it makes BitShares and Steam. There's a synergy between them now, that otherwise was never there. These chains can be used as tools to help each other. We just have to think about it that way. But yes, please bring it up next time too. Actually RSVP and we'll give you custom. I love throwing these tokens at you. You know that. So up next is going to be Alex P. Morris to talk a little bit more about the status update on what he's doing with the order matching bug that we've had to deal with in BitShares, or maybe some people don't believe it's a bug. He'll be the best person to tell us today. Alex, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Sounding perfect, man. I'll go ahead and I'll step back and let you give everybody. Can you give everybody like an explain it like I'm five, just real quick recap for anybody who doesn't know, and then get into the status for like what you've done and where you are.
Sure, and I think I see PC, Conrad in the room too, just to get him, and maybe he can chime in. I'm hoping, since he's also been we've been going back and forth, me, him,
Sure.
A-Bit. So hopefully he'll be able to say what his thoughts are and what maybe still needs to get done and such. But it's looking pretty solid, more or less. We're getting to the point where like there's less and less kind of issues coming up. We had to take a little bit of a step back just to, I wanted to re-clarify, because I have a feeling PC didn't realize everything I was trying to do, because it wasn't just about getting the prices to match. It was also about having to step through all the prices available. Like, if someone makes a mistake, it's like within the context of that mistake, well, okay, if you clear the book, you might still get like a high price. But the other side of the goal was to make sure that for the pair, excuse me, for the pair that you're looking at, you're not buying more of that leg than you really intended to. So it's like in the example I put, and I'll throw the link in there again when I stop talking for a second. But it's like if I put in an order to buy one whale hole, that was just a joke asset I was messing around with, at 100 test to whale hole, but there's like one sitting there at a much lower price, like at 10. I don't want to buy like much more. I don't want to buy 10 of them. I still want to only buy one, just at the lower price. And the way I had designed it is basically it will do that, or have that behavior, except it also has to account for multiple orders. Let's say, now one's not the best example, but let's say I put like, well, actually it is, because if there would have been more and I'm not limiting it, it would have hit the next order and the next order and the next order, until it balances out to that size. And that's that's really the problem. So you see, so what I'm doing is on every match, I'm doing a pay refund and giving the person back the difference that he agreed to, or that he thought he wanted to pay. But like, if he paid one instead of say 100, I'm refunding that whole difference. And then I'm doing that on each consecutive higher price or even the same price match. And PC was, I guess he was thinking of it a bit differently, and thinking, well, why don't I do a refund all at once at the end? But the thing is if I did it at the end, I wouldn't know unless I literally had to do some sort of a lookup at what each individual other price was to sort of cut it right there and say, okay, now we have everything we want. So I'm refunding the overpay on each fill to account for the better price that you or the order taker is receiving. Now I'll step back a little because that might have been a mouthful and maybe there's a question, but yeah, if you also want to understand better, you can take a look at the ticket, and you'll get a bit of an idea, what's been, how this sort of got to this point, and there were some other little issues that came up, like, PC had asked a question here and there, so I would always go back. I always go back and iterate right back to the code. Let's see what the code's doing. Let's see what the code's saying. And I did, in fact, find one other issue. Or I had missed a little bit of one case when you flip a pair, but also there was an additional issue where I had to go into the match code directly, because I don't know how well some of the people here know the code, but there's a rounding error even in the multiplication. Like if you take a price and then multiply it by like a match price, there's not enough precision that's being used internally. So I had to add an extra order of magnitude to the precision, and I did that across the board in all of the multiplication and division I was doing on the integers, and it seemed to solve that rounding issue as well. What I did notice also, and it really comes up like for some of you who've used whale shares versus say BeyondBit, that's where it becomes the most prevalent. But even on like a whale share BeyondBit, I was getting like 123.99 instead of 124. That what I just described corrected that, which was very promising as well. Okay, I'll step back and see if there's any questions.
Well, I would like to just really quick state that you state a little bit about your experience. Whale hole's hilarious token, yes. But a little bit about your experience, because you have 20 plus years in building stuff for markets.
Yeah, it's I've messed around with this stuff for a long time. From I wrote a whole trading platform which was basically designed to help my trading originally. Sometimes I like to joke like it was to help cover up my own trading weaknesses, and but it's an analytics engine, lets you even auto trade or support your trading. But it covers everything from foreign exchange to stocks. You can even put options into it, but also futures. So I have a bit of experience in not only dealing with all the APIs that come down the road in multiple languages, but you kind of pick up a few little tricks. In fact, the one I had mentioned with the rounding is something that I had dealt with sometimes in foreign exchange, and it came up more once for those of you who are familiar with foreign exchange, and I would figure at least some of you are on BitShares, because there is a very similar concept. In fact, BitShares took it even a step beyond what I'm used to because of the pair flipping and such. And I think that's partially why this has been very tricky for many people to get, including myself, frankly. I mean, that's why it's like I'm getting literally each day that would go by, it's like I'm getting almost like a double understanding of just even how the code works and everything, as I did the previous day to understand it better. But it sort of brought like an additional level of complexity, because you have to, it's like you keep having to flip your thought process and to make it sure it works. And in fact, I even wrote that on the GitHub ticket. I said there's some duplicate code in there, which while I was just messing around, didn't always start that way. But then at some point, I left it in there just so it's easier to understand what's going on. But what's interesting is like sometimes even when you flip it, the code you need to correct for the flipping is actually similar. You just have to account for that one condition, but then not necessarily apply that same logic to an opposite condition. But sometimes you do, and it's almost the same, even if you didn't realize it at first. So that just
it's something where you kind of have to play with it and find along the way, okay, this use case, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. We need to fix this. And this example.
Right, and sometimes you just while you're thinking of one thing, it's like you're forgetting to look the other way. So that's why the most powerful thing you can do is like whenever someone says, "Well, I don't know," or it's theoretical, what I'll say is, let's just go back to the code and see what's going on and step through. And
this brings you. I hate to interrupt you, but this brings me to a place right there. I think from what you've said, it brings me to a good place for me to say kind of insert into this discussion. This is where you stand right now. You've pretty much you've boiled all of these issues down so far. You think that you have the solutions you've proposed them, and now you're discussing them with other core developers in BitShares to kind of see where they stand, if there's something that maybe you're missing.
Let me just cut you off. Even better, I mean, Abit and Conrad have sort of been, we've been going back almost since the beginning, which I'd like to say also, some of you might remember it didn't always end up, we had a few issues at the beginning and such when I originally posted this, but I'm hoping it could even be an example of like, look, you see how we can actually work together and be productive and maybe come up with a great solution. And it's like and Abit also had given a lot of little tips, and Conrad as well. Sometimes I just get stuck on what felt like the stupidest things, but then they would just give me just enough to sort of get me back on track. And it's like, okay, that's what I need to do. And in fact, I'm sort of there with one last thing, which I had said, and that's sort of where I had part a little bit the last step with Conrad, where he was sort of thinking, well, why can't I do the pay refund at the end and implement it as an additional operation, which may seem like a better way to go. But from two standpoints. So one is like I can't really do that because unless there's a better way, which I could be missing, and maybe he'll be able to correct or re-guide me on that one. A better way to sort of do it all at once as opposed to having to do it separately. I don't see it certainly. If you understand what I had explained. But there's one other thing I'd like to do, which comes up in certain cases. Excuse me again, because. There are cases now where you might put an order in and it'll just block it entirely and give you a full refund. And you might be like, well, what's going on here? And I'd like to be able to at least give a message like couldn't make the match or, full refund.
Yeah.
Like I said, this happens more on like the Beyond Bit whale shares kind of situation where it's dual zero decimal. Not so much in the others, but there will be cases where that comes up and it might be confusing, especially if you're dealing with very small, like 0.0002 size. And I'm not sure the best way without raising an assertion, which is basically like an error message. I'd rather give like just a status message. And the beauty of it, which I had also said, the original functionality is still there. The way this is implemented is as an extension. Which is already, I even put that into the client wallet along with a few other features. It's actually very easy now to create a decimalized UIA asset with a precision. I had so much of a headache trying to do that. I literally wasted half a day. And then Abit actually said, oh no, you just have to pass null. I'm like, wow, I wish I had seen that somewhere. Thank you. In the documentation, I just never came across it. I thought I had to put the little squirrely brackets, and that's why I kept turning into like a bit asset instead of a UIA asset in the client wallet. But now you could literally put one little line and just add one in. So it made it a lot easier for testing in those cases as well. But again, it would be nice if I could just pass a message back and say what the person wants, and then at least they have the choice because they can literally they just don't designate the pair that they want and the original functionality applies, and if they're willing to take the risk of overpaying, they can do that now. So that's fine too. So you see, it kind of gives both options. to someone, but they have to at least, they can actively choose which way they want to go. So it's almost like offering people an extra level of protection. And then if they're still willing to overpay, which of course will make them more careful in the first place, then they'll say, okay, give me original functionality. I don't care if I literally overpay 40% in this case. I just want those darn things. And they're expecting it. They'll get the weird fill that they are privy to, and all is good, and there's no uncertainty, and no one's going to be sore over what they got.
So you feel like you have this solution pretty well done.
I'm always afraid when to say that, because it's like the next, and it's happened already.
Well, let me interrupt you real quick,
I'm getting more and more confident.
This brings us to the point that we're trying to get to, though, is that you're at a point where you kind of want peer review and you want this to be looked over a little bit. Can you tell us where you stand with that, or are you at a point where...
Like I said, I mean, I feel that's been going on with Conrad and A-Bit, but it's we've been doing this now for several weeks, and it's not like anyone else has shown up. But I would love if more people just at least took a look, stop by, took a look at the ticket, and just sort of see what their thoughts are. And maybe they'll even come up. Like I said, I'd like to figure out a good way to maybe throw a status message out. Maybe I should do it as an assertion. I don't know, but I somehow that doesn't sit well with me, that as being the right way to do it. But again, I'm still very new on this code base.
Yeah, so other people helping you and teaching you a little bit, maybe, or giving you at least other insights or angles or perspectives is valuable to you at this
Absolutely
stage.
Right. So if someone, if there's someone around who knows this code base, to the level that Conrad or A-Bit, and the more eyes, the better. And and look, I don't, the last thing I want to do is put something out that could mess things up. And like I said, it's one thing to iterate and test quickly, but with this as a blockchain, you just can't screw things up. You want to make sure it's darn well thoroughly tested. And I've been adding more and more test cases. Some of you might even wonder, like, there was one funny thing there. Why is it saying seller buys and buyer sells? Actually, that goes back to sort of documentation stuff. I pulled that out originally and got sort of confused by it from the original test cases. And I wasn't sure quite what was going on, but some of them I sort of started reversing, and now it does say buyer, buy, but I didn't know quite what was going on at first, and then it was a little tricky trying to switch it. So again, as I got better and better at understanding what's going on, I was able to create more and more test cases that fit. So some of them, it didn't seem worth, just bothering to flip it all, because then I have to make sure all the numbers rematch, and it was already working, and it still seemed to serve its intended purpose. But even that, I think I have about 8. There's some test code that's in my. I created a whole new module called opt test, so all my tests are in there, including some that I had pulled from the original test cases that were available. But it's it's still possible I missed a few. I think there's about 18 or so, 17 or 18 actual test cases, and then a few where I was just sort of like playground test cases when I was just testing things out. But I left all that too, because I'm hoping, if anyone else comes into this code base, I'm hoping that there's little clues on how I got to be able to figure out all this stuff, and that only helps everyone else, because I'm figuring they're going to have to go through those same steps at some point if they don't quite understand all the dynamics either. Because that's the way I figure things out. Like, I need a little example, and then it's like, I can think things through as much as I want, but until I just keep trying and trying and trying, that's why for me, like, the quicker I can get a recompile time down, the better. Some people have, do it differently, but that's how I do it.
Can I ask you real quick, how can the community help you most right now? I'm getting that the most help that you could get is more in the form of input and feedback. Is that fair to say?
I think, the work might be done, or short of like I said, I'd like to do a little more with the, if certain parts we can give more feedback, things like that. But it looks like it's working pretty well. I passed all my test cases that I put together, but maybe I still missed something. Maybe I could have more test cases. I put all my tests in the client wallet and watched it in the
Alex,
open ledger. It all looked great to me.
Alex, have you considered Have you reached out to Xerox? Is he in a position through the foundation that he might be able to offer some review help?
That hasn't really been my thing with these worker proposals or not. I don't know. I posted all this in it's on GitHub. Conrad A-Bit know about it. I posted it in the BitShares Telegram. I'm also kind of new at the Telegram. Like sometimes people send me messages. I still don't quite I don't quite get how it all works over there. So sometimes I miss things a little bit. But I haven't gone beyond that. If he looks at the BitShares Telegram, then I figure he would have seen it and maybe said something, but I haven't so far. I'm not sure where else to reach him at this point. But
to be real honest with you, Alex, the biggest resistance I think and it's not really resistance, it's just a matter of conscious effort. I think there's not that many C++ programmers that are out there, and the ones that are focused in other areas, so they probably aren't devoting very much time to get it. Because your problem, the thing you're researching and working on here, is a very complex thing, as you're discovering, and trying to get other people involved to the same level of depth that they understand it well enough to review it is hard to do, because it takes, they look at how much effort you've put into it, and they think, well, even if I only put in 10% of what Alex did, that's still a significant amount of time to really give him reasonable feedback.
I agree. That's actually why, even if you look at the thread, it's kind of come to the point, and where it is pretty clearly documented, and I tried to lay the code out almost so simply so you can, I wrapped it all up literally into like one function, so that you can see everything that's sort of going on, and it makes it a lot easier if you can have just like a test net running. All the test cases are there. I even included all my examples in my own like little crypto playpen, so you can literally plug and play some of them right into the client wallet and watch them on Open Ledger.
Could you, by any chance, post a link to that specific function? I'm not a C+ programmer, but I know C really well, so I can probably give you some feedback. It may not be useful to you, but I'd be willing to look at it if you give me a link to that particular file in GitHub.
Hold on. That's the issue, but let me find the exact.
Let me go ahead and cut this off for just one moment, because this is important stuff. But I do want to just really quickly kind of sum this up, and a lot of this can be done outside of the Hangout. But I want to really say something like, there's going to be a bounty system. There are going to be these types of things. I'm focusing on how the community can help you. So how would they help? Like, how would they reach out to you if they wanted to help you with this in their own way? Or if anybody has ideas, feel free to also, say, oh, this is something as well. Because like Talkinator said, we have the bounty system that's coming, and things like this can help people like Alex. And to be honest, Alex, what you're doing, and what we even talked about it last week, these are the types of things that if somebody who knows what they're doing and has 20 plus years of experience in stock trading or Forex trading or markets, when they see these types of things that are not fixed, it really kind of makes them say, okay, I'm going to walk away from this. Right. And that can be the difference between $100 million market cap and 10 billion. If people actually respect it when they come on and use it. The people who know what they're talking about and have huge networks in this stuff, right? So how do they reach out to you if they would like to help you in any way, shape, or form with this?
I mean, the best way, like, I'm on Discord. I also, I have that Telegram up now as well. Obviously the GitHub thread, and I'm on Steemit too. But yeah, it's all connected.
You're Alex P. Morris on
Always
Steemit?
Alex P. Morris. I'd even be happy. On Discord, if someone wants to take a look, I can even do a screen share with someone and through Skype even. We can do Skype. If you want me to walk through with you a little bit, I can do that too. Just to say, okay, look, you want to try it? Give me a test case. Let's see. I'll show you what I mean. Let's see if what comes up. I could, like I said, I have it all kind of set up now. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way.
And I just want to quickly chime in and thank you for the test cases that you've put into this. Those are super valuable, both to understand the problem and for new people.
Yeah, I want to chime in and say thank you very much for all the work you're doing, Alex. I mean, it's a struggle for you. It's pretty obvious to see that, but nevertheless, it's valuable what you're doing. You're providing documentation. You're working through issues. You're understanding the problem, and everybody that understands the BitShares ecosystem to the level that you are able to is a big asset to the community in general. And you're doing a great job. I agree with Talkinator about the test cases as well.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys, and I hate to cut it off because these are the types of topics that really, I mean, they're pretty pressing. At least to me, when Alex comes in and talks about this, and he's got the experience of building this, I have a hard time disagreeing with it on just based on what he says. But if there's no other reason, like your experience kind of adds another layer of trust to you, in my opinion. So it's like even if there are potential downsides, I think that it's worth it for us to discuss it, and for the people who know what's going on in the actual code to peer review it, because there are some people in our ecosystem, you know, who can do that. Now, of course, I would love to also make sure that we all consider helping them too. We tend to forget quite often that money isn't the only way that we can help. So just keep that in mind for people like Alex, PC, and Abit, and the people who are doing those things to help him with projects like this. Of course, I'm not going to just, I can't miss everybody. I'll miss everybody here if I try to put a whole list out. But there's a lot of people in the BitShares community who are bringing a lot of value. So with that said, thank you for bringing it up. And Talkinator, you're going to be up next to talk about bug fixes and locking away BTS for voting. Would you like to bring those up now?
Sure. Do you have an estimate of how much time we have left?
Oh, we've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay. So the first item is an item that actually Peter Conrad, also known as Cyrano, brought up. And I wanted to bring it up here because he had also been asking for stakeholder review and opinions of people. And specifically, he was asking about with various bug fixes that are being put in right now across BitShares core. I think his emphasis was more on the core side, but it could also be broader than core, including the GUI. But with various bug fixes that are coming to be completed, he was just asking the community just to review how they can be, whether they should be reviewed directly by the community, or whether for regular bug fixes they can be reviewed by the developer community, and then also by the witnesses. And if both sets of people are happy with those bug fixes, whether they can just be accepted. And with that approach, then stakeholders have their ultimate review by whether or not they approve of witnesses accepting those bug fixes. Okay, so hopefully what I just described made sense.
I'll say, okay, so can I just really quick clear something up? The developer community is, how are they assessed? Like how do we figure out who is actually technically in that developer community, since they're going to be making decisions?
That is largely, I would describe it as largely a matter of reputation. And to some extent, to also a lower extent, it's also by people who are voted in to work on worker proposals. So there are people in the community who have already been with a lot of experience and have already been reviewing various issues related to BitShares. And so I suppose that's roughly how I would describe the BitShares developer community.
Do you think that maybe we could have like workers that kind of pay for retainers of people who get voted in, who have like a level of trust like that? Like, for instance, Xerox would be one of them. You might be one of them here. Custom might be one of them. You know what I mean? Like they sit in and they say, okay, we have, this is kind of like my retainer fee for sitting here and waiting for these moments when you need me, because I have so much experience messing with all this stuff.
That is a kind of a review or verification team, I think, is certainly something worth considering. Now, also having that said, I want to give props also to people like Abit and also Peter Conrad, who are often reviewing things on their own and not being paid. So in that sense, for example, they develop their reputation for assisting people, both with their knowledge and also for reviewing other issues, such as being brought up by Alex Morris. But this idea of perhaps a retained verification team is worth considering.
What would you say would be a fair wage for that? I mean, that's just out of curiosity, your thoughts on a matter like that, because I don't really, to be honest with you, know what somebody would pay for a retainer on this. And this is, of course, a skill set that's kind of really hard to find, at least right now.
Right. In my opinion, a person who has a broad view of entire sections of the system, such as Abit and Peter Conrad, in my opinion, those people should have possibly one of the highest hourly rate, let's say, because not only can they help people address issues at a specific section of functionality, but they can also attempt to see what, if any, interactions with other parts of the system there are. So that would be my personal opinion.
The Marky Mark saying 100 plus K.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, easily. I mean, easily.
Yeah, I'm thinking ease, like especially as things like EOS come out and new chains are going to need new developers.
Is this just for a retainer to keep them interested, or is this for them to accomplish certain work? I mean, from what I'm gathering in this conversation, there's people like PC and Abit that aren't rewarded at all for their involvement, even though they're pillars of the community in terms of devs that know what's going on really well. So I think that some compensation for all that would be nice, but I think you're going to find a lot of resistance from the Chinese, for example, that they say, well, why should we pay for something that we've been getting all along for free? And so, I mean, that's I'm sure what the objection will be. Yeah.
These are the things that the cultural differences, perhaps. I don't know. Do they have I would imagine in business that they have retainer fees. And I would hope, and maybe we don't know for sure, right? Maybe we should check and see. But that's a very real possibility based on things that have happened historically, right? That's where you're coming from, Thomas.
Yes.
And for us, we do have to kind of think about this aspect on a strong level, because these cultural differences might really be strong. And I don't know what the answers to that is right now, because I don't know what they would say. You might very well be right. Obviously, history kind of puts you on the side where you're more likely right. But I would like to find out what they think about it, because retainers, I would imagine, for really high demand positions, and just to make it clear, you said, are they going to just sit around? I would say no, because they already have shown that they don't sit around, but they're here just in case something happens that, that needs to be fixed or needs to be worked on. Because you never know. We've had in the history of BitShares one time already, right? When the network locked up and we had to, Bytemaster came in, Abit on PC. I'm sure all of those people were in there working on it and trying to figure out what was going on. And
That's right.
If they're not there, what happens in that instance? You know what I mean?
Stay down longer.
Well, yeah. How long? You know what I mean?
No, until the problem gets fixed or it doesn't get fixed. I mean, if I'm sure that PC and Abit were looking at it intensely before Bytemaster even got wind of the problem, and it was through their discussions, I'm sure, that Bytemaster said, well, let me see if I can figure this out and help you guys out here, because it was already down for hours at that point.
Yeah. Oh, right. They had already identified largely the area of the problem.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk about with this talk? Please feel free to go ahead.
Oh, okay. So just for people to think about, because just how they feel about how regular, quote unquote, bug fixes should be accepted in. And I think at the moment, the I don't want to bias anybody, but at the moment on the forums, on the BitShares Talk forums, the consensus seems to be that regular bug fixes can be handled through review by the dev team and review by witnesses. And so if anybody disagrees with that, perhaps bring it up either in the next Hangout or on the forums or somewhere else that you might think is appropriate.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense personally, because you have like a separations of power between the witnesses and the coders to some degree, at least, a peer review kind of aspect that they can provide, right? And all of these people would be voted in by the stakeholders. So
everybody has a say, I mean, the people that I think are the first responders to do the reviewing are the ones that are most competent to do so. So we're talking about more technically oriented people. The shareholders at large don't necessarily have the expertise to evaluate the changes very effectively. Now, they might from a user interface standpoint, they might from a functional standpoint, which is important, but they do have a say. And if their say is going to be expressed through the witnesses that they support and through the committee members that they support to some degree. So, I mean, everybody has a say. Some have more of a direct say than others, but in my view, it's fine the way it is. We're trying and make some kind of formal voting for each bug, I think, would be way too much for the general community to approve and deal with.
Well, we always talk about, everybody talks about this being the trustless economy, but let's face it, delegated proof of stake, that's one of the things. Humans and trust are very important too. Obviously, the incentives are aligned that if you mess around, you potentially lose a lot of money and a lot of reputation that could have made you a lot of money, right? So we've got a lot of cool different incentive structures that kind of also, but everywhere in crypto, ultimately, there are people who are involved and trust does come in. So I think we have layers of oversight almost. You have the ability for various community members to talk about it, on an uncensorable chain that's called Steam. So we have these tools. So I'm looking forward to seeing us put them together and putting the puzzle pieces together. And thank you for bringing this up, Taco. This is a very important subject. Did you have anything else about this subject that you'd like to bring up, or are you good on that and you'd like to move on to the BTS lock away from
it? For this topic, I'm good. And I think really considering the time and how broad the next topic is, I would recommend that maybe we bump it to the next Hangout.
No, that's fine. You're more than welcome to do that. I appreciate you bringing these topics up today. Really quick, what I will cap off this episode with is that we did have a poll on Steam that we posted, and it looks like the overwhelming majority, 74%, the last I checked, is in favor of a change. 76%, my apologies, is in favor of a change to Saturdays for our Hangouts. And these are kind of Hangouts / conference calls, really. They're probably better to call conference calls if people are going to take them a little bit more seriously sometimes. But nonetheless, we have these events on Fridays when a lot of people are working, and a lot of people have said to me, many people have said to me in private and in public over time, I wish that you would change it to a weekend, to the weekend, so we could actually join. And since we are a worldwide community, we are trying to enable people from all over the world to join up. And that means all over different time zones. Having a time when it's during the weekend when you don't have other pressing concerns, or at least as many pressing concerns that aren't flexible, it gives you the opportunity to join.
Have you come up with a time of the day on Saturdays?
I'm thinking it's going to be the same time. We can ask about that if we have problems, but once you have it on a Saturday, it really doesn't matter quite as much what time it is. You know what I mean? Because it's going to be a bad time for somebody everywhere.
Yep.
Somebody is going to be like, oh man, that time still is crap for me. Like it's 3 a.m,
Yep.
or it's so. I have to just say, like, come on over at 3 a.m, and sign the guest list and get some tokens. That's all I can kind of really do. But they can always listen to it. They can always promote it afterwards if they can't make it live, right? Or they can even promote something that is a topic that they would like to bring up in these Hangouts. So, with that said, I thank all of you for joining up to this Hangout. I thank you for joining up every week, because without you guys, our community is not as strong. A lot of people don't realize that the people in these Hangouts are some of the crypto experts in the world right now. It's kind of stunning to say it, but whenever I was at FinTech Week, I asked a question, and the panelists came to me afterwards to ask me questions too. We are people who don't underestimate yourselves, is my point. See you guys next week.